Welcome everyone, and welcome our usuals, Alex, David, and Connie. I'm sorry that Casey couldn't make it today. He had a personal emergency last minute. Everything's fine, but he couldn't. I think he said he might join to listen, but he won't be able to speak. And welcome to our special guest today, Andy Beach, which I think doesn't need any introductions. And it's good to see so many good friends joining. And today's conversation, which is our last Mata Talk of the year, is about the what topics we can't ignore in 2026, in particular in our innovation track for the summer camp. For those who doesn't know, we host a community event in Uruguay, in Montevideo, last week of January. It's our summer, Southern Hemisphere. And we do a bunch of community, technology, open source, cultural activities throughout the week. And this year, we're adding a special innovation track to it at the beginning in Punta del Este, which is 2 hours east from Montevideo, and it's my hometown. And this year, and thanks, Andy, hosting these which is supposed to be close conversation, an open conversation in a closely knit group of participants here, different people, to see how can we in our industry and how can we build the next generation of media. So maybe Andy Koff, you want to introduce your idea for this innovation track, and maybe we can kick off the conversation and see what our guests have to say.
Absolutely. I thank you, first of all, and thank you for letting me do this with you, JP. I really appreciate it. As I think about it, to me, this is an extension of everything we have ever done at conferences. My favorite part of any conference we go to are the drinks at night. And it's not necessarily the drinks, so that's always pretty special. It's the conversations we have, because invariably we're processing the talks that we had during the day. The meetings during the day are always a little more customer focused. The things at night become this really be. What should we be working on? What's the thing that is particularly interesting? And we come away with some great ideas within those. Now, maybe it's partially alcohol fueled. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to judge. But we have as a group, we in the industry have a good collective view of what we think should be working, and I think we sit at a pretty important area, because we've all sort of seen these transitions through the cloud era, and now as we come into this and think about things, I think there's a lot of patterns that we can think about and institutional knowledge that we can bring along the way for how things develop and the right course that they develop, so that it's not just a cool trick or a cool feature that gets brought out, but it's something that fundamentally changes the way that we move the industry or the product that is part of our piece of it. So that to me is what we'll do at the innovation track, is take those talks and really expand on them, and then hopefully come away with almost a manifesto, a white paper that says, like, these are the things that we need to be thinking about, and the good ideas, and a realistic path for implementation.
Fantastic. And thanks, Sandy. Maybe I know David's going to be here for the innovation track. I haven't heard if you're going to join us or not. Hope you do. Tony's going to be here, and Alex, you're going to miss it. So maybe we're going to start with you, because you're really missing it for very good reasons. And so maybe, Alex, what do you think it means in our conversation? Like, if we're going to start talking about what's next or what problems we need to fix in our industry, like what should we be talking about?
I feel like I'm being punished twice now, like once for not going, and now you plot. Well, I think, God, I hate to say it, but we're gonna have to talk about AI. I hate to say it. I know it's Andy's favorite topic, but I feel like every time everyone's like, let's not talk about it. We probably have to talk.
Well, I guess I totally in the room.
Yeah.
I guess, what is your angle? Like what should we ignore and put behind us as part of just close the box, thank it for its service? But what are the things we carry forward, and what is the part of AI as we think about it? Because I have thoughts, and I'll throw a couple of mine out there if you'd rather react rather than come up with something. But I am curious where AI fits into the conversation for you.
I think now that it's been, companies have been focused on it and talking about it, like I feel like it is time to reevaluate and just look at, is it being applied in the right places, right, in the right parts of the workflow? Like, are we getting our worth out of it, right? And not just like our money's worth, right? But like, okay, it's got clearly an environmental impact, downsides, right, to using it, right? So like, are we spending those resources in the best possible way, or are we just throwing it at solving stupid problems?
We've certainly done that in the past. No question. We love solving stupid problems. Are there other things, David or Connie? Are there pieces of AI you hope we're talking about 2026?
Right. So on the CDN delivery side, right, and working with our live teams, right, we have what I like to utilize. One is use AI to train our model to detect piracy, so anomaly patterns, right? So right now, right, for capacity reasons and contractual reasons, right, we do have workflow that are manually identifying anomaly, right? Now the biggest challenge is it's really difficult to accurately say this is the same user, right? Because we don't want to monitor millions of look at every single user IDs and count how many repetitions they are. That's way too expensive. Right? And then I accurately identify what is the threshold for when we can safely say this is a pirate, and then we can terminate their session without actually terminating a valid user session. And that is a very challenging exercise for us, right? And collaborations with other partners, right? This is like through using it as a really quick. Now, the other scenarios are very similar, right? Instead of traffic pattern, we are now looking at QoE, right? So we want to look at QoE because sometimes we see, oh, we just have maybe some increase or playback failure and it hasn't reached our threshold, and we're just kind of eyeballing it. And then eventually it might have reached the threshold. So we would like to, it can monitor all kinds of different metrics. Some of these root challenges, like for example, some ASN or some pods having issues, CDN edge pops. We can tackle that before it started impacting user behaviors. So these are the tackling with the teams in the company.
David, any you want to throw into the mix?
I mean, yeah.
Can I do I was going to do a follow-up question for Connie.
Go for it,
if it's okay. Are you looking at, when you're doing it, are you looking at like a central system that's working on it, or are you looking at different instructions to look at, you're doing an analysis of CDN data, you're doing an analysis of QoE data coming from clients, et cetera, and how granular do you need to get in order to get valuable data back? Like if you're getting instructions, like do you have to specialize it to say like you need to look for iOS type errors versus like the Samsung or Sony TVs, etc.
So we have observability projects where we are working with all the different teams, right, to bring their logs into the same system, right? That in itself is a challenge. I think that was our last Mate talk. How do we manage the large amount of data, right? What is necessary and what is too much, right? So from there, right, we can look at per device, per geo, per platform analysis. Is working with us basically like a one team fashion with the player team to look at the different state of the work, the process. So it could be on the control plane, it could be on the data plane.
I mean, to me, I think a lot of this is wrapped around like the way I see it is I see this: there's action, there's analysis, there's generation, right? Action systems, like what was kind of historic, a lot of the DevOps type of stuff becomes really straight, and this next year is where we really start standardizing that. It's going out and has moved out of like the stuff. Now it's about applying it and making it the norms and the standards, right? The analysis, like Connie was talking about. Well, we have all this data these days, but we oftentimes lack the cohesive unification of that and signal to noise. So we can actually have and these disparate sources, and this is something AI is going to be very powerful in growth and better suited with. And then generation, whether it be code gen or otherwise, right? Ways to go faster, ways to do tasks, ways to create, and that one's the sometimes more questionable or fearful area. Then we have the balance and challenge of quality versus speed and reliability, and how much of that is founded fear and the requirements that you need to be able to do what you want and be able to get there. So yeah, I do think that as a whole AI in 2026, it's a matter of how do we make this now part of our standards and our normal operating procedures as we've been using, playing, identifying, and what really becomes the norm going forward, I think is going to start to be more clear, more widespread.
Yeah. So if I take all the pieces that you guys just talked about, parts that I think we will be talking a lot about next year are agentic workflows, the base patterns that are orchestration of lots of other tasks. And then there may be AI that lives within each of those individual tasks as a feature for a transcription, for a, computer vision analysis, for another piece. But it's then the coordination of all that data exhaust out of all those various outputs into some sort of decision layering system to do a particular task, whether it's find the pirate for Connie, whether it's figure out why iOS phones are playing back poorly in the Northeast minutes for some reason, or whether it's for go localize the next version of the season in the library, or do a QC pass on all of last night's primetime content, things like that. There's lots of scheduling and routing and other pieces that we are doing and we have had to handle larger workflows for. And I think we're getting to a point where we're connecting the dots to more different little AI pods so that we can make those workflows more automated based on the tasks that we want to do.
Interesting. And so we're talking about data, and in particular data related to how we deliver content. What are the topics do you think we should be covering? I'm also asking these. I see Olga connected, and I think about provenance. I see Rebecca connected, and I'm thinking about operations. Like, of course, I see Scott, and I hope we talk about captions and accessibility. So any thoughts in the audience on what else we should be covering in our innovation track?
Yeah, a couple things. I'm having a very minor crisis of faith this week as I'm out just how big the capabilities are today in Claude subscriptions. And it's gotten me thinking a lot about metadata, a little bit about what Cineverse has been hinting at, what they're working on. Where Tonio is saying things like, we need to dump traditional data schemas, and all of that kind of collided in my head yesterday when I was working on a project, and I realized I don't have to keep spreadsheets anymore. I can just dump everything in a folder and say, hey, show me everything that every conversation I've ever had with Fremantle's recent news. And I don't have to do it. And I realized you can do that for content metadata. And I realized that there are still going to be, business rules. There still has to be a kind of like what Andy was just talking about. But it can all be something that is no longer in traditional schemas, which I think might once and for all solve rights problems. Rights is still a huge issue. IDs are still a huge, no streaming network that here at check all of their content partners on their, they always get pulled underwater. There's all of these sort of things that I think that there's going to be a combination of being able to say, okay, every piece of content and every piece of media has something particular, some weird little bugaboo wrong with it. And now we have something that can tell us what that is, fix a lot of it, and bring it forward to the producer to be able to make judgment calls. And I think that before the next, we're going to be talking a lot more about general. And I think AGI is going to help bring that along. So I would like to see any AI development towards content management to be something that's seen as incremental for the incoming general intelligence. Yeah, I'm kind of freaking out about the metadata group right now.
There's some passionate about it.
You have some echo, Connie. Sorry.
Yeah, I am very passionate about it, and everyone talks about it as a solved problem. It's far from a solved. So I definitely, as we talk about the next media stack, and I'm sorry because I did get to this meeting a little bit late. I assume that'll be part of the conversation. What I'm seeing as we're talking about MOQ right now is, I got Charlie Good today, who some of you know, and we were talking about the lessons that we should have learned from our team to learn from HDS and Smooth. Think about, we're talking about mock now, and we're talking about delivering video, and no one wants to talk about time metadata or all the things we didn't do with the previous 4 protocols. Talking about what old men we feel like as we are resolving the same things for the third time around. So hopefully we're not resolving things, and things like time metadata and accessibility and all the things that actually make video super intelligent and useful are part of the conversation. I did want to ask, though, as we talk about this new stack, are we talking specific to large media companies? Because we have a lot of representation of that. And in my world, it's one piece of the use cases. There's a lot of other use cases outside of media companies. Is that part of the conversation? Is it kind of a general conversation, or is it more related to media companies?
Andy, you're muted.
Sorry, I was limited to large media companies. I think there are things they will need that individuals and smaller productions won't, but we've sort of seen this slow convergence over 20 odd years of production technology that used to be purely something that a big budget was going to have, the thing that an individual influencer can also now use to get out their production. So I think the more overlap there is, the better off we are at the end of the day. But there's certainly going to be some sort of enterprise level pieces that Warner Brothers is going to need, whoever owns them next year. Sorry, Connie. Sorry, this year.
Yeah.
There are going to be things that are needed there that just will become optional flags for the individual or the smaller production company. So I try to be mindful that we realistically can't design it for everybody. That's not going to be possible. That's how when you aim for that, you end up pleasing nobody, and then you just end up with everybody creating their own version of everything. But if you can create something that by and large everybody can take, and then maybe do a fork and pull in the parts that they need for themselves, you probably have hit the best middle ground you can hope for.
Thanks for the clarification on that.
Definitely. And also, I think we're seeing more and more that this industry is not only media companies. Like, the creator economy is already a reality. And I think that there are way more platforms than just the big media companies. So definitely the conversation is going to be way more than just big media companies.
I think that just to add to what you just said, JP, I think that the level of nimbleness that's going to be needed to keep up with these short technology life cycles is something that's actually going to even the playing field for a lot of the small and medium players moving forward.
Hey, JP.
Fantastic.
I think, boy, I could talk about this for a week. There's a number of things. So first of all, we talk about small versus big companies. I think the small companies need the big companies to step up, and I think the big companies need to step up right away. I have lots and lots of time researching how we should be using AI for multi-language translations in audio and text and sign language and mixing of audio, and how do we get experiences that are unified across the whole playing field, not subsets of those experiences for people who need these features, right? So as an example, audio description is one, and I think we are starting to dig in on the opportunities for machine learning, automated mixing of the stems from the mix for dialogue replacement in multi-channel audio, right? That way, when you select that additional language or audio description, you're not getting a lesser experience than the person who can take advantage of the broadcast in the mold created in. That said, those audio translations, and for those of you that saw yesterday on LinkedIn, I responded to that. Live in particular is unique because there's a lot more forgiveness in the live space by consumers for errors or actual ingest of that content, right? And so the translations in audio and the translations from one language to another in text right now, but they're good enough in the live space to get things over the line, to get folks who normally cannot watch live television, be it a broadcast, to get them drawn in. And if we as big media don't start taking risks and understanding that it's not great right now, and sort of starting to make decisions on a hybrid approach. So we know we've got a soccer game that's going to be in English and Spanish. Okay, fine, use humans for the active languages that you know are going to be critical. We exclude folks who speak German and French and all the other languages that we can include there, even though they're not great. And then we take that feedback from consumers, we take that feedback from the data we've learned around the inaccuracies, the less than stellar quality translations, and then we apply them back to the models. But the only folks who can afford to do that are big media, and everyone else can take advantage of that. We've got to get going right away, even if it's not perfect. Amazon for doing what they did, but I think we still have to keep pushing. And I think live is a really good space for pushing rather than VOD, because there's a lot less forgiveness in VOD than there is in live.
I'm going to pick on Microsoft for 1 second just to make fun of them, since I'm not there. And since I think Alex and I are the only two ex-Microsoft people here. About 8 years ago, I got asked for some examples of quote unquote Hollywood audio that some of the data scientists could play with. And they immediately came back and they were like, we don't understand. It's not working. It's either breaking or it's just describing weird like cheering or other things. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe you're just not reading all of the tracks. And he was like, what do you mean all the tracks? Why are there more than 2 tracks? And I was like, oh, no, there's like 16 in this one. And he was like, 16? What are you doing with that? And it literally had to explain to the data scientists who were helping design the tooling, that they were going to have to deal with multiple channels and they were going to have to find the correct channels, because not everybody stores, not everybody is great about like, all the dialogue is here, all the background, yada, yada. And that blew, and it spawned a whole level of training that they had to do to go think about how they were going to do this, because they were literally just assuming everything in the world was a stereo pair. And that's all they had to design to ingest. And so right there, that was 6 months of re-engineering so that they could handle a multi-audio track.
It's going to take rethinking of a lot of these things, right? And honestly, I think that's why something like AC4 has been a little slow to adopt, because we have to go all the way back to creation and say, forget about how you've been mixing. We can't just replace the center channel or eliminate the center channel and put something else there, because you're breaking the mix, right? So we do have to go all the way back to the source and figure out the right way and how we want to move forward, whether it's client side mixing, whether it's server side mixing, right? There's so many variables and questions, but again, we have to push for sure.
Definitely. So we've heard a lot of topics already that Andy shared a few moments ago, like 5 minutes ago, on the topics he thinks we're going to be talking next year.
Yeah, they're in the chat for anybody who wants to pick on one, or if there's one they want to jump in on, feel free.
Any of these topics you think, like, you agree or disagree are going to be in the conversation next year?
I think, like one of the things, maybe even if Andy's list line up towards it, but the user experience, and that starts before you even start watching your video. Discovery. It's still fundamentally challenging with a lot of the reasons and a lot of different applications, a lot of different way things go, and it's hard on the live. And you talk about rights and the headache and the metas that maybe someday we'll get out from, but who knows? To me, like, there's a saying, right? But to me, the experience is queen. How do we balance that out? When and how do we actually make that? Because it's something that always comes up. Oh yeah, this is going to be a good one, and we can look to do that. And maybe this is where AI is number 4 on Andy's with AI, right? There's more that we can do with the data, and also a lot of this stuff's huge now, and that could be a huge factor. And that goes all the way down to other Neil's, also how the audio stuff is going to work and how we can bring that together and bring that forward. Closed captions. With that. And also I think the ad space, where do we go more towards, really more skippable ads? You have 5 to 10 seconds to get your ad. After that, you just expect your users to try that option. Or are we talking about to be able to do ads, but to pair that with in the hopes of, continued brand recognition through, a passive approach? I think these are elements that are going to need to be a focus and need to be whether or not we're going to solve, we'll make progress. But I think that a lot of the stuff will continue to pop back up. And I think I wish now I'd gone back and looked what we said a year ago and how many things are the same but different, or completely new.
Love that one as a topic. I mean, I'm constantly complaining about discovery. because we broke it in the industry. We fucked it up real good. And it's sort of beyond a single platform because there's multiple kinds of discovery. Like there's only so much that a single app can do to optimize it for them, but that's ultimately kind of just recommendations at some point. True discovery is being able to do it cross-platform, which means it maybe lives at more of an OS, lives somewhere else in the stack from the other content. If you think about it, that's really the only that we had.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, like what I ultimately probably want back is like TV Guide circa 19, like because it had everything in it. Across a wide range. So how do we go back to having that sort of range of to find things? Even the EPG, I would probably take one of those back at this point. As much as I disliked them at some point because of the headache they caused for XML that I had to ingest.
If you want an EPG that's like, you want an EPG that's just yours to go after. You want it to determine only what you would find interesting.
There's an interesting piece of that. So yeah, I do want it to primarily be the things I'm interested in, but I do want it to sort of challenge me. I don't want just circular recommendations that slowly hone me into a tighter and tighter circle of now I'm only watching, Taskmaster clips and dog clips and cocktail videos. So I want it to throw some current events at me and challenge me a little bit here and there. I wanted to A/B test me effectively for other elements that might be interesting or being talked about across social media or other places, and be able to potentially use it as a new data vector, or if I shut it down. Two-way conversation.
I have a stupid question because you just made. In my mind, I've always thought about recommendations and discoverability as something that's very similar, but you seem to think that they're different. Making sure I'm stupid. I don't.
No, I think of recommendations purely as sort of the thing, like recommendations to me is the simplified version of discovery, which is, oh, you watch this, so you will also like this. It's like pattern matching of metadata tags, sort of at a core level. True discovery is what else is going on in the zeitgeist and what else is out there that may also be of interest and can potentially be brought into your world as a new topic. Recommendations are things I already like. Discovery, I guess, is things I don't know I like yet because I haven't explored it. I would say Netflix is a great example of a discovery engine in many ways because they brought international production to us in a major way where all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, turns out I love Korean dramas and I love South American thrillers and a wide range of things. Scandinavian crime dramas are like the jam in our house. And I didn't know any of that existed, but there's like whole libraries. Sorry, JP, I cut you off.
Oh, sorry. Do you think that social media like Instagram or TikTok is really good at that? Like at figuring out what you like and making you discover all the time and easily switch, like get all the content you like and you could be looking at it?
I think they are great discovery vectors because they are sort of the data feed version of what we're talking about. Social media is still, even though somebody broke Twitter, social media at large is still sort of the modern version of a water cooler where we talk about the stuff. And for those who are really too young to remember, the water cooler is the thing we all used to stand around when we all went to an office together and we talked about Mad Men last night or whatever it was we were watching on TV. And social media is that now. And so we need this part of discovery is sort of tapping into what are the broad topics that are being discussed there and where does that fit into the content library that I have access to?
I do think that the discovery goals for short form are very different than, and because I think a lot of people look at Instagram and TikTok and they think, oh, like that's an example of how like discovery should work, right? Because it is so good on picking up on your interest. But I don't think that's necessarily true for Netflix or for Apple TV.
I think the short form is a good segue as well into things that sort of nacho, like having trust in the content, what you're looking at. Is it true? Is it real? Right? Deep fakes and how we can detect that. Is that going into Providence, C2PA, and the wonderful world that Olga lives in, and security and all that, right? how does that really influence and or not? And at what point do people care more and more about that? I think that's going to grow because we're having so much from the generative content and other things that you can do with that. That, now at what point is that really going to tip the scale that people want to know if it's actually true or if it's just something.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think provenance is going to have to be a big focus next year. I think we're going to look back at this year as probably the last year where we were able to kind of subjectively, determine if a video is fake or not, right? Like there's still enough telltale signs in deepfake videos where we look at it and go like, oh, that person has 6 fingers. Clearly, this isn't real. But I think next year and the year after that, that's just not going to be the case, right? Like it's just going to get so much more advanced and so much more sophisticated that we're not going to stand a chance. So we do need to start relying on metadata and with standards like C2PA.
Alex, dude, I have a cousin with 6 fingers. I don't appreciate that.
All right, 7. How about 8? 8 fingers.
So you mentioned provenance, and I saw Olga turn the camera on. So but
Getting pulled in Hal. But before I have to ask a very important question. You have a cousin with 6 fingers. Is it on the right hand or the left hand?
No, what is that? Personal identifying information?
I was just curious how
I don't
long
have a form
how
side
long
for
this
that.
cousin is involved with killing the father of Inigo Montoya.
You killed my father.
Exactly. So JP, you were pulling me into the conversation of C2PA.
definitely, because we're talking about what are going to be hot topics in 2026. Where we going to be talking about innovation in 2026, and definitely provenance is becoming an urgent need and not like a nice to have. And of course, you're probably the best person in the room to comment on it. What do you think about it?
Hey, I have 2 opinions. One as a vendor, another as a human watching the news. And I think this as a vendor and as as me, Olga, I think it's important. As Alex said, it is getting better and better. And sometimes I'm looking at some videos on Instagram and I'm like, ooh, thank God on it. Because then I would actually start to ponder whether this is real or not. And I think I'm about to get into the world where I just assume things are just fake and move on with life. But also, there's such a group of people, a pretty large group of people who just don't care. And I think that there's a part of me that is very terrified about the group of people that just don't care. Where people just, and you go, it's fake. And they're like, yeah, it supports me. I'm going to use it because it supports my narrative. And I think as news organizations, as people producing content, as I don't know, I was talking to a friend of mine who works in PR, was talking about protecting the brand image. And I'm like, ooh, by the way, the technology are there, but they can sign all their publications and their statements to protect. Companies should care about what is out there to be able to prove that what is being published and said is true or not. And I, as a human, would want to know if it's true or not. But the group of people that just doesn't care immensely. And I don't know how to combat that. I really don't.
Love is always the answer.
Well, I wish it would work.
Excellent. So we have 10 more minutes for this conversation. And there are a few topics we haven't talked about. For instance, we didn't discuss anything about monetization, advertising. We didn't discuss anything about like MOQ or any other like streaming protocols or low latency. Do you think there's going to be any of those topics coming in the next year? Are we going to fix any big problems with that?
We're going to make sure. Fix any big problems? Maybe. I mean, it depends on what you consider. What is it? Something else. And even with Q initial focus and spec down to, like, is it going to be able to do quite as much? Is it only going to be really used for your ingest protocol versus your distribution? I think it's probably still got a little bit longer to go. That's just my opinion, and I'm not super deep in there. The ad side, I touched on, like, I think there's going to be continued growth, and I think hopefully more attention on how are we going to improve the experience around ads, both from kind of the technical, but definitely from the end user. And is that will we also bring more in with SGI and adoption there? But there's definitely room for improvements areas. We'll see where it actually pans out. And once again, like, what problem is it really solving? Or just incremental improvements?
I do think like for us, it's like I don't know, you're calling them nonlinear ads or next gen ad formats, or you want to call it like targeted squeeze backs or targeted L boxes and things like that are becoming a much bigger discussion topic. So how we start to like deliver those things at scale with targeting across the ridiculous range of whatever 70,000 device models that we
Right.
stream to. I think that's becoming a really big topic here, especially as for live events where we have, various degrees of ad that are like the American audience sort of accepts that a football game is like 78% advertising, but we don't see that same acceptance in Europe for a soccer match. So,
And I think, a good point that I think that is going to really more to focus, it has to, is as innovations happen, and we're ripe for more innovations, timing wise and so forth. And I think in our cycles, how do we deal with the devices that don't have the capabilities to be right? Linear ads, it's cool. What about all your older TVs? What are we going to do in that situation experience and eventually work them out? People love those TVs. Like, well, how do we deal with this? Oh, well, we also going to do a edge-based compositing and bring that in that route so we can still have when we have to for those, and then we lose this challenge of like we could do the coolest things in the world if just how do we deal with those situations?
Next week, I'm moderating a panel for streaming media, and I was doing a pre-interview. One of the guys is from Globo, is from Stars, and they talked about two different approach that. The Stars guy has a deeper problem because they set up their app long ago, so they're now reliant on they have to support all these older legacy devices. The Globo team is able to start off and say, "Hey, we're our going forward," and they also created two different apps. App, which allows the people just to watch through there, and then all the fun, cool 4K, HDR, all that stuff is on the other app instead. So their bifurcation. I think it's international. It depends on saying what are people used to, what do people care about. Internationally, they may not care, but I think people mostly they're used to using subscriptions, whereas in the US, people just assume it's going to be free to watch. So your habits doing it that way. But everyone had the same problem with the thing, and everyone also thought about. I think we've talked about this earlier. Why don't we just work with one of the low and to say, hey, we'll give you a free device, just throw your old shit out.
Yeah, that stuff came up when we were doing work together at NBC. You get these old Fire Sticks and how do we have to spend on this? It's a small population, but that's very vocal and it hits the wrong marketing message. It happens.
Yeah, and in the case of global media companies, a small user base could be 100,000 people, right? It's small to them, but obviously that's a large group to be impacted. Bhavesh, I was waiting how long it's going to take you to mention smooth streaming in the context. I was wondering how long it's going to take you to mention smooth streaming.
Sorry, things we're going to do 26, Bhavesh?
We're bringing it back.
Yes. We're bringing it back.
I actually mentioned that they actually, that was their thing. They still had so many set-top boxes to support right now. They could not. Stars is saying that they can't shut the old ways down right now because too many people are still using it, and they can't get them off.
Definitely. Thankfully, no one mentioned about killing H.264 yet. So 64 is still alive. We have 5 more minutes. Any last minute, any last call on what topics we must cover for this innovation track in the summer camp?
I saw that Andy mentioned native codecs. One, right? Are we at a point where the traditional codec deployment strategy is going to be just completely disrupted? Right? There's instead VV is taking way longer than the other codec to be adopted, right? And so, I think that would be interesting.
I think, so just putting it back on my compression geek hat, the reality is most AI models don't need all the visual information that goes into it. It can do with a much lower resolution. This is we've already solved in other versions of codecs. We have a ladder. So that right there, if we had a scalable video ladder built into the codecs we were using, we could just tear off a lower resolution and send it to the model while the humans deal with the 4K. We get the same results and probably pick up some latency speed in the system because we're not decoding a full 4K frame. We're doing half res or quarter res or whatever. So I think that's an interesting area. And then I think the reality is in a lot of particularly the computer vision tab, you don't really need the whole 4K frame. or the 8K frame if you're working in that. But if you're doing face detection, you can go do bounding boxes and regions of interest and send a couple seconds of a full frame, but then you identify coordinates for the others. And if you can segment out and deliver just that, again, there's some operational efficiency there potentially. So I think those are all areas that codecs are going to be challenged with. So I don't think we're done. I think there's plenty past 264 and 265 that we'll be worried about when we think about what codecs are doing in the future.
A lot of topics to discuss. It's going to be hard, I think, Andy, for us to figure out what are the topics to discuss in those 2 days. But definitely those are going to be in the mood of late night drinks at IBC. Today, Mika mentioned that on her a LinkedIn post. So maybe, Mika, you want to speak up and say like that you don't want to be the only woman in the room.
Like that.
Go for it. Not everyone read your LinkedIn post.
I don't like this. But thanks. I see a lot of women here, a lot of ones which I tagged in my about it. The other day, I took it with JP, and I think to be part of the change is important to have different perspectives, different voices, different backgrounds, and that's why having only male participants, I think it's lacking some perspectives and different views. That's why I invited some of my colleagues to be part of that change and be part of that conversation. I know many of you know amazing women in an industry that are doing great. So I just want to make their voice be heard and to take a seat in the table, basically.
Thank you, Mika. I think there's nothing to add to what you just said. So if you want to know more about the summer camp, if you want to make it to our into the website, I'm basically here in the chat. Many people here in the room in Montevideo, David, Alex, Connie, Vivesh, Scott, and I think I'm not missing anyone. So it's good to have so many alumni. Many people come to Uruguay with their family, with their partners, with their kids. I think this year we're even going to have people, their parents, to Uruguay. So this is a very family-friendly community event in which we're going to discuss the future of media, but we're going to do it together. We're going to do it as a community because we think way better ideas come up when we collaborate. So thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful end of the year and start of a new year if we don't talk again. And it's so great to be part of this fantastic community we built together. Thank you all so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.